Hi, everyone. I'm Molly. I am one of the co-founders of the Secular Education Association. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our panel is going to be Bridging the Divide, Faith and Secular Voices in Dialogue. And give me just one second here. Building understanding across differences. So our goal this evening is to explore one of the most pressing questions of our time right now as we speak, which is how do we navigate differences between faith and secular worldviews, between Christianity and Christian nationalism, and between groups like LifeWise Academy and the communities they impact without losing sight of our shared humanity. So that's the question that we're looking at tonight. Joining us, we're lucky enough to have Steve. Is it Ghikadis? Am I saying that right? Say it for me, Steve, please.
It's Ghikadis.
Ghikadis. Okay, sorry about
Yeah,
that. So we
that's
have
okay.
Steve Ghikadis. He is a humanist officiant who conducts secular marriages, memorials, and many more meaningful life-affirming celebrations. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and a Bachelor of Education in primary, junior, and intermediate grades. He was raised as a free thinker. Steve has been married to, is it Christine or Christian?
She's a Christian. Yeah, her name's Cindy.
Oh, I'm so sorry. To a Christian. My
Yeah.
apologies. Goodness gracious, it's been quite a day. Married to a Christian woman for over a decade. His wife, Cindy, believe in the importance of bridging the gap between believers and non-believers. Their two young children are being raised in an interfaith household and are free to choose their own path. His family dynamic inspired him to write Humanism from the Heart, Building Bridges Beyond Belief, a book that emphasizes the importance of working together to celebrate the diversity of all of our worldviews, right? So Steve serves as an ambassador for Humanist Canada, for Recovering from Religion, and Sunday Assembly. In 2024, he was awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal for significant contributions to his community in Windsor, Essex, Ontario, and Canada. So thank you so much, Steve, for being with us. Quickly,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, no, we really appreciate you coming here. I know these are sort of long introductions, so I'm rushing through. Please forgive me for that. So Dr. Riedesel, Professor Charles Dr. Riedesel, is a man of
Got
science
it.
and logic, an admirer of Mr. Spock's Vulcan character in the original Star Trek series. And at the same time, he is a man of faith, deeply involved in his local church, and he's currently serving as an organist and treasurer there. But while also embracing more than traditional Christian perceptions of God and the existence of good and evil. Intrigued by the nature of human intelligence and emotion, and inspired by a career serving as chief undergraduate advisor for computer science and engineering for thousands of students from a host of countries and life experiences, often as kind of a surrogate parent, right? We all remember having, hopefully, you remember having a professor or a teacher like that in your life. Charles has pondered how artificial intelligence computers might one day become indistinguishable from being human. And he joins us. He's been in retirement since 2020, and he is doing a lot of work in his own community, not only with his faith and within that sort of capacity, but politically, right? And so he's on the school board for his local district, and he also makes a point to go and look, and not even look, but go and visit and partake and participate in, opposite political ideals, their events, their speakers. So he is very much a builder of community and a builder of bridges, and we are so happy to have him. Thank you so much, Dr. Riedesel, for being here.
Pleasure to be part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Zach, did you want to do a little talking to begin with, or do you want to just get started?
No, you guys can take it away. You're the experts.
Thanks so much. So did one of you have anything that you wanted to start with? I was going to sort of let you sort of jump us off into the conversation and then go from there and let it lead us naturally and have an honest conversation about these sort of things.
Sure. So I actually didn't know what LifeWise was until we had a little bit of a brief meeting, and it's funny because I still didn't really want to look too much into it because I didn't want to get like a biased idea of what it was before we got into any kind of talking about it. But the funny thing is that after we mentioned it in our meeting, I started getting ads for it, just as you do, right? So I clicked on one of them just to kind of see just briefly what it was. And I'm still not fully understanding of what it is. So maybe Dr. Riedesel would like to fill me in on what that is.
That would be great. Dr. Riedesel also was on a school board and part of like the drive in Nebraska, one of the very first people to sort of pay attention to what we were talking about and to get concerned, to get involved. So yeah, absolutely, Dr. Riedesel.
True. I first encountered it in my town home, Beatrice, about 12,000 population, Nebraska. Back a couple of years ago, when a civic leader, uh, actually from a very associated with a very religious church that happened to be right next door to a brand new elementary school, made Beatrice the forefront of LifeWise's efforts to get into Nebraska. They had initially talked to a couple of the administrators who said, "Hey, this is for the board. We can't say yay or nay in having release time for religious instruction." That's that RTRI type thing that they're pushing for, and they claim is constitutional, but really there are plenty of questions behind the reality of that. Many questions to be had. Uh, but he shared in a civic group, a MAPS organization is what we called it, where on occasion we have people that bring together all the social service and support people, hospitals, police, what have you, from the community to just discuss and share what we're doing, the services that we offer. And this guy had this glowing report of, hey, here's a LifeWise Academy. Here's something that we all want our kids to get some kind of positive religious experience. Uh, they did the kind of thing like Bible stories with lessons with the Bible stories. They have a good time with the kids. And this would be for an hour a week. And it would be during school time. So I collected the materials that he handed out and I read it over and I thought, oh my, is some of this true or what's going on? So I dug a little deeper. I got into a technical report that was put together by an affiliated research institution that gave a bunch of claims, statements, and supposedly supporting statistical documentation that said, wow, kids that have been involved in this, they don't get into as much trouble. They perform better in their classes. It's great. And around the table, people were kind of oohing and awing, saying, wow, 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 this looks really positive. Well, as I did my exploration of the statistics and some more checking around, I determined that it's a fraud. Lies, flat out unsupportable lies from their claims.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, when are they actually going to show up for the board? Well, they didn't show up. They didn't show up, but we were also kind of waiting for our unicameral. Nebraska's unique in being very easy to get things passed because they only have one house. So monitoring that, there was a bill, LB 550, introduced to authorize this kind of education. And well, I established some contacts with a lobbyist for the School Board Association and knew some of the senators myself because I am in the Democratic Party. I'm one of the chairs of the county and on the state central committee. So I shared my research with them and discussed it deeply and back and forth and just tried to say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's the truth. This, if this were real, it would be something that naturally people would glom onto and say, wonderful. But I decided the way to attack it was this is a lie.
Hmm.
Uh, the claims are not supported by the facts. There's no way. That seemed wiser to me because, again, we're talking about relating to people who really want these things to be true. They want to be able to grasp these things, and they're being given this. And I could see so many people just swallowing it hook, line, and sinker.
Now, I'm
Hmm.
curious, did you share your research with both sides or just the Democratic leaders, or did you share it with the Republican leaders as well?
Initially, just the more democratic leaders. There was an education committee in which I discerned, okay, who are the people who need to go to, and we had a very good lobbyist that helped provide some direction and shared some of these things. But by the end, when they were coming down to making decisions of whether to go forward or not, uh, our local uh, senator, uh, I was sending information to him, a couple of people saying, hey, look, I know this looks good, but hey, this isn't what it appears.
Hmm.
So, fortunately, after several efforts, it was defeated in our so-called 90-day session in late May, early June. And next year we just have a 60-day session, and we'll see what happens there. Because the finances that LifeWise has is incredible. They soak up money. The churches, the communities in which LifeWise go in, uh, do not gain financially. They pay, and they're always begging for more money, so it can go up to the top. Where who knows what happens to it other than building new headquarters, things like that.
Yeah, facilitating the spread, right? Zach,
Yeah.
real quickly, do you want to give Steve like I don't know, the very briefest overview of RTRI since he's lucky enough to be a Canadian and and also, and the briefest overview also, of sort of how the lines have been drawn politically here and in conjunction with that, and like I said, just as brief as possible but enough to give him an idea of kind of how this is different from what we've been experiencing and how it reflects our current situation
Sure.
culturally, politically, all of it.
Sure. So release time is something that's been established in this country for a long time. It started in the 20s. You can trace it back even a little earlier than that if you really dig. But it was really set in stone in the 1950s in the Supreme Court when they said that students could be allowed to be released from school to have religious instruction, right? That's what RTRI stands for, is release time religious instruction. So it's basically this premise that school boards can have a policy that allows students to leave during the school day while still being marked in attendance to get this religious education, right? Now, typically what we've seen in the past, we've seen the LDS church do this. We've seen the Jewish communities do this. We've even seen the Catholic communities do this. But typically they are doing it for their own communities, for the people who already are in that faith, right? What's so different about LifeWise is they're targeting people who are not Christians. They're trying to target kids who don't go to church and convert them. And that's really a huge difference that we've seen, and something that the Supreme Court specifically warned about doing and not letting that happen when they did uphold these laws. So that's pretty much what release time is and why LifeWise is a different beast than what we've seen in the past.
Gotcha. Okay,
And
cool.
of course, if you've been watching any of our news and what's been going on the last, I don't know, what decade or so, guys, the entire Christian nationalism movement that's happening in America right now, where there's everything from the Seven Mountain Mandate to the NAR, all of these different groups are using this right in their own specific way. So whether it's politically to push them politically forward, whatever it may be, we've got the president who is basically just feeding the evangelical people, everything that they would like. And these are not just Christians, right? These are Christian nationalists. So it's very different. And it has little to do with faith and more to do with power.
Hmm.
And so
At the
the
top. I think that's true at the top,
yes,
right? And I
yes,
think that's what we need to talk about here is how do
yes.
we reach those people who aren't necessarily aligned with that? Because there are so many good meaning people who just believe they're doing the right thing in spreading the gospel, who may not truly align with this Christian nationalism, with this political spectrum. So how do we reach those people and how do we talk to those people? I mean, that's what the beat of what we want to get into here, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a really good starting point is kind of identifying the people who may be a little bit more moderate in their beliefs and their political alignment, and then just applying the principles of, um, I guess, humanism, but like just general kindness and empathy, just being able to see these people as human beings as well. Especially the ones that are not trying to push any agenda. And I don't know if you've heard of street epistemology. It's so epistemology is just the study of how you know what you know. So, you could say like that chair over there is going to hold me. I know it's going to hold me because I've sat on a chair before and I've seen the structure of a chair. I've seen them built before. I know how they operate. Could I be wrong? Sure, right? Because I could have gained a little bit of weight or, the glue might be not be holding on the chair or something like that. So I could be wrong, but my epistemology for knowing that the chair would hold me is because I've seen this before, and that's how I built that knowledge. Practicing the idea of street epistemology, going out and talking to people, and doesn't have to be necessarily on a street, but just going and talking to people and using the Socratic method to get to the heart of why they believe what they believe. So instead of going up to somebody and saying, "Why do you believe in myths?" It's more. It makes it more approachable if you say, "What gives your life meaning?" And if someone can answer that question, and then they think about things that they've maybe never even thought of before. What does give my life meaning? What is it that I'm actually trying to accomplish here? And when I do presentations, I usually talk about the things that you should be looking for in a conversation. So I always tell myself, what can I learn from this situation? And also, uh, what is it that I'm looking for? What is it I want to get out of this conversation, and why am I here, and what can I learn from this? And those are kind of important questions that you can ask yourself, and then try and use your empathy to put that on somebody else as well. So just ask them questions that would trigger those responses, and then you can go from there. That's kind of the starting point.
Yeah, I have been doing quite a bit of studying, uh, reading books, thinking through things myself, talking to people, and recognizing, thanks to my opportunities for world travel, for having worked with students from all over the world in all kinds of circumstances, uh, try to see where people are coming from, recognizing they're all individuals. They all believe what they believe for some reason and
Hmm.
may believe these things as strongly or stronger than we do, but their ability for critical thinking, opportunity for analysis, opportunity to engage with other people to examine their thinking, is so oftentimes lacking. So, boy, when I have, well, as an example, I had a student who was Palestinian at one point, and his family was still involved in the Second Intifada. His family was so glad that he could come to the United States to study. And yet I was working with him, a lot of hand holding and personal support, uh, because he found it very difficult to study when he was worried about his family.
Yeah.
So that's just one of so many examples. Had from Spain, very conservative country, and parents Catholic tradition, And this guy would qualify for the Olympic swim team, but well, he was gay. You know what? You come out when you're gay and you're trying to deal with parents that have no conception of what it's like, no willingness to understand in that kind of environment. So many times people are deluded in various ways or have never had that opportunity to engage, to learn. And I say they come by their ideas honestly. They genuinely don't know any better. I distinguish these masses of people from those leaders who deliberately try to divide. The fascists, most specifically, and the fascist tendencies in our country today, and not just this country, in a number of other countries too. There are very fascist leaders. And I'm not using the word fascist in just relating to Nazi Germany, but in the technical term, if you learn what are the characteristics of fascism and how they come to rule and believe in a hierarchical society, uh, so many religions, so much religion works with hierarchy. So you've got a pope on top, you've got cardinals, you've got various layers, and they may truly believe that through the Bible, through their understanding, that God's on top. Hey, then men and women have to submit to their husbands. That's just part of the natural order. Children must submit to the family leaders. And going back into the 17 and 1800s, uh, the slaves, particularly the black, were considered not to be really fully human and were more like kind of grown-up children. So they had their place too, and it was our responsibility to take care of them. And so there's a hierarchy like that. And the church that I'm dealing with here in Beatrice adheres. I've checked out their constitution. I've looked at the stuff they have. Adheres to the Danvers Statement. Look that up sometime. Danvers, and you'll discover an attitude toward women, putting them in their place. A lot of feelings that really should have been doused 100 years ago. Thought we were past that. We're dealing with people who genuinely, honestly believe and promote, and you might be hearing more of this today, coming from various sources, that we were on the downward hill when women were granted the right to vote. And rue that day. We have some of the attacks against, okay, something crazy enough. Comic books. Remember when comic books, come on, no, 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 no. This was during the 50s that they were being rejected as anti-Christian. This is not healthy for your kids. Guess where that came from? It came from a certain superhero, Wonder Woman,
Hmm.
strong woman.
And it was Harry Potter and rock and roll in my generation, right? I mean, it's the same thing, just repeating itself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So somehow we have to figure out how to relate to people who think totally contrary to our concepts of what is true, what is godlike, what is it to follow Jesus. They have dramatically different ideas. How do you relate to someone whose religion is so built in that they cannot conceive of a true democracy and equality of people? That's what we're facing.
And I think
Yeah,
part of the problem is how many different interpretations of just Christianity are there, right? Much less the other faiths that we're talking about. Just looking at Christianity alone, there are so many denominations, so many different
45,000.
interpretations.
Yeah.
How do we reach these people?
I enjoyed many discussions with my dissertation professor. He's from India. He was a Sikh, wearing kind of the headdress kind of combination, and he talk about how that worked for him and the travels that he would go on as part of that, and how it related to the Hinduism. Uh, no, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's definitely our goal should be to try and find what the commonalities are between all of us as opposed to the differences. And anytime that I've done any type of interfaith symposiums, that's kind of what I'm going for. And when I talk to people, like after the symposium last time, I was talking to one of the Muslim gentlemen and I said, why is it that women aren't allowed to worship in the same place as the men? And he
Yeah.
was like, well, and he had to try to come up with excuses. He said, well, like they'll be cooking in the kitchen and we'll be smelling the chicken biryani. And then it's like impossible for us to have our prayer because we're just thinking about the food. And I'm like, well, is it always the women that cook? Well, no, it's not always the women. Okay, well, then that can't be the answer to why it is. What's the actual reason why? And if you keep going down this line of questioning, which is kind of using the street epistemology style, he kind of got to the point where he's like, yeah, I don't know. And I said, so is it tradition? And he goes, yeah, it's tradition. I said, okay, so it's tradition. So that means it's something that it's like guilt from years ago that you guys are just still kind of, tagging along with, and you don't really have a modern day reason for it, but you just know that there's a traditional reason for it. And he goes, yeah. And then he says, yeah, like maybe I'll talk to my imam about that. So it's like, just getting the ball rolling and having them think about things that maybe they've never thought of before. In his mind, he had never even been asked a question of why women worship in a different spot. And when he was put on the spot, he had to come up with a reason that he thought was the reason. But then when it came out to the conclusion that it wasn't the reason, he had to try and find something else, another reason. And when he couldn't find an actual reason, then he had to admit that he didn't have a reason and that he had to go ask for the reason. And I'm sure the imam's going to feed him something that, is probably not even part of the reason why, but it's just going to be, something else that he's going to have to then figure out. And that's the one thing that I find when people go and talk to their priests or imams or rabbis, it's like they get these answers that fill in a little bit of the hope that they have, right? They want to have an answer. So they're like, oh, cool, this is the answer. Now I don't have to question anymore. This is the answer. And then I feel like a lot of times after a while, or if they're actually questioning on that answer, that's when they start digging again and going like, okay, well, this isn't holding weight for me anymore. I really need to think about this. And I think that's the critical thinking that people need to apply. And
It's
like you were saying before, Charles, about finding a mutual understanding, finding an understanding of where it is they're coming from. And I think that if you do ask these questions and you can find it where they're coming from, then you can start to, and it's not a natural thing, but trying to find respect for the person and where they're coming from, because you're like, okay, this person was raised this way, they can't help it. Like you said, it's just ingrained in their system now. So it's like, okay, let's find a way to bridge the gap, find a commonality between this you and this person so that you can maybe get to the next level of, we're all human and we need to work together.
Yeah, and each of us has something to learn too, to accept the possibility that what we have ingrained inside ourselves, there may be new realizations by being able to share and learn from these people. I know I have certainly changed dramatically from growing up as an Iowa farm boy. I just think back, wow, okay, what what was my thinking at that point? I was more interested in logic and things like that, and hey, the reality of God, and but it seems so primitive at this point. But part of the, if you're going to talk to people share with people, learn from people. It's how do you approach them in the first place?
Hmm.
How do you establish some kind of a relationship? And the message that I give to everybody, that every group that I work with, is building relationships is key. And
Hmm.
that's not necessarily fast. It may have to be a one-on-one type thing. And when in this world today, when we see such utter chaos, how can we accept that let's go where the people are, let's be available, let's be friendly, let's be cooperative, let's see how we can offer, how we can offer our help, understanding. You know, it's like being on the school board and saying, "Hey, I've got all this information that I have from school board meetings, this material. Uh, Ask me. I'll try to help you understand these things." And when people make certain claims or contradict, you know, in many cases, I can say, "Look, I don't know that for a fact. Here was my understanding, but I will be glad to go back. Please let me know. I will see what I can dig out for you and share with you."
Hmm.
Uh, but
How common is that though? Because in my experience, most people are not willing to admit when they're wrong or learn something new, right? Or is that just my perception?
that has, there are many people that are very resistant to accepting that. But the only, so you have to be willing yourself. I have to show that I am the one willing to listen, to try to understand better where people are coming from. And perhaps opportunities will arise where they will trust me enough to ask and can share where can we find issues in common? What are their needs? What are their wants? What are they afraid of?
Yeah.
What they hate? Why do they hate? So, Steve, I appreciate it. Yeah, what you're saying there too, in learning from these people.
Hmm. It's almost like we need to establish situations where a goal can be accomplished. So something like this, where we're saying we're bridging divides, right? Like Charles, if I had met you on the street, if we had a conversation, I might never even know that you believe in a God, right? Like that might not even be a thing that comes up. There's a book written by Dr. Darrell Ray called the shoot, no, I can't think of the name of it. The God Virus. And basically what it talks about is you can have conversations with people and just avoid the conversation about religion altogether. And it's not that you necessarily are putting fear or anything on that topic. It's just that sometimes when people talk about their deeply held beliefs, their personality changes, and you're not really speaking to the person, you're speaking to the belief. Because, and he gives this example where you're sitting beside someone on a plane and you notice that they're wearing a cross, and you say, "Oh, I see you're wearing a cross." And sometimes they'll get kind of like a fake smile and, "Yes, yes, I love Jesus." And they get into this whole spiel about Jesus and their beliefs. And you kind of talk to them about that a little bit, and then you kind of dismiss yourself, go to the restroom, come back, and then say, "How about them Knicks or whatever?" I don't know sports. Anyway, but then it's like their whole demeanor changes and everything changes, right? Because people are no longer speaking about their deeply held beliefs. And sometimes when people have deeply held beliefs, it becomes a part of them. So if you speak negatively about their beliefs, they think that you're speaking negatively about them when actually you're just talking about the ideas. So the best thing to do altogether was what Dr. Darrell Ray says is just don't address the belief itself and just have a normal conversation with somebody as you would,
Yeah,
about any other
at least
topic, but just
until you have some kind of rapport.
yeah, build
And who
rapport and
knows when that moment will come.
I think
So,
that, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say that I think it's important to obviously, recognize what your capabilities are and what your strengths are. And I know that for some people, especially, people that are part of our organization and people that I know personally, they have very, very heavy religious trauma.
Hmm.
And so I'm almost of the mind of, if you cannot separate yourself from your feelings about it, then, almost like you're saying, don't broach that at all, right? And
Yeah,
don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to have to, because
right.
there are those of us that can do this sort of thing and parse it out and compartmentalize and really use logic over emotion, and there are those of us that can't, right? And I think it's
Yeah,
okay to understand if you're not the kind of person that needs to be engaging face to face with someone who is possibly contentious about this sort of thing, right? It's okay
yeah.
to know that.
And I've had a conversation with, so I'm kind of live in the Bible Belt of Canada. Like it's kind of along the border of the US where I am. I'm actually south of Detroit. So like the
Oh, sorry,
song
we bled
Journey.
over. Or
Yeah,
sorry.
the journey, don't stop believing, when they say born and raised in South Detroit. That's me. That's where I am. So I'm actually south of Detroit. But yeah, so I had a conversation with a neighbor of mine, and we were talking about, I don't know, it was just kind of the neighborhood and this, that, and the other. And then they said, well, what church do you go to? I'm like, well, I don't really go to church. I'm an atheist, humanist, secular humanist. I have a community that's kind of like a church, but not really. What about you? Do you go to church? And he goes, well, I do, but that sounds really interesting. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Did you want to ask any questions about it? And then he's just like, yeah, like, what do you believe in? And I'm like, oh, I believe in a lot of things, actually. I'm like, we probably have more in common than we don't. Like, it's probably more in common than we have differences. And then from then on, we just really became really good friends. And, it's just one of those things that if you have these conversations and it just comes up naturally and you don't make it a big deal, because I think sometimes too, when you're like, oh, I'm an atheist, and people are like, whoa, that term is so scary, right? But if you kind of explain it to people, or you just say, like I do have a community that I belong to, and it's a lot like a church. We help out, we do, food drives, and we do this, and the other. And people will really lean into it. Like, wow, this is really interesting. I didn't know that you could not be religious and still be a good person.
Yeah. And we hear that a lot, right? Which is unfortunate. And it's something that is just another brick in the wall between people who are religious and aren't, right? When
Hmm.
when we're confounding morals with religion. And I think that we're
Right.
having a real big problem with that right now in our country. And that's sort of adding to the fuel to the fire, right? Is that
Yeah.
this confusion between what those two things mean. And we know just from practice, Zach can echo me here. um it doesn't work. We've always said it doesn't work to attack someone, right? We know that much.
Hmm.
We know that attacking them, their beliefs, their character is not ever going to bridge the gap, because just biologically, when that happens, they close down, right? And so
Yeah.
it's just, and you can get all into that. I would love you to get into that.
Sure.
But it's very much a matter of knowing your audience and knowing what what may work with them and what won't, and what to focus on, right? Because we've always said whatever your issue is with LifeWise, it's legitimate, whether it's
Hmm.
the secular, the lack of the secularism, whether it's the ostracization, whether it's the educational loss, whether it's the safety problems, whether it's that your denomination doesn't believe in that sort of thing. Whatever your biggest issue is with LifeWise is absolutely legitimate and real. And so we always have told people, know your audience, know who you're talking to, and lean into that. Use that to your advantage. And so that's something that we have always said. And so it's one of those things where, like, how can you do that? Do you have any tips for, we already know these things, but how do we implement them?
I think
Right.
it's important to understand that that's a two-way street too, and that you're not going to be able to reach everybody, because I can't tell you how
Yeah.
often we're being attacked. I'm told every
Hmm.
day that I'm Satanist, and I just don't engage with those people, because why would I? At least
Right.
from my perspective, I'm not going to get anywhere. Why would I waste my breath and my time? And maybe that's not the right mindset to have.
Now,
Yeah, it,
you've got a good point there. Yeah, I too feel that there are people where it's simply not worth your time. They're not in a place to be able to hear. So, again, knowing who you're going to have your better chances with, Uh, yeah. Also, many, I have many like-minded people, friends, associates, and as I talk with them, they are afraid of talking to their opposites.
Hmm.
And when I'm with my Democratic Party friends, I'll say how we have to establish some kind of a relationship.
Hmm.
So I also go to the Patriots, uh, conservative group in which I'd established a presence, a relationship going back to when I was first running for the school board, and they were inviting candidates to come in and talk about what we're running for. I did. They listened to me. They asked a few questions, and I kept coming back and offering work with them. At this point, in both groups, I can meet them in restaurants, smile, say hi, hi, how are you doing? What's happening next? Be like that. And another inst similar to that kind of thing is we have weekly protests, Sunday noon protests by the courthouse and in Beatrice, anti-Trump kind of thing. And at one point, we had a counter protester across the street, had a mask on. Hey, and then a similar example, a couple weeks after that, and the on my side of the street, people say, "What a chicken! Won't take his mask off. Don't know who he is. Wouldn't talk to him. Wouldn't. I'd probably go over there and blow up. I couldn't contain myself." So what do you do? I just walked over and greeted him, welcomed, asked a couple of questions, what his case was, what his issues were, uh, smiling as neighbor to neighbor. And in his case, it was, well, 20 million illegals just destroying the country. Okay, now I know something.
Mm.
And he was willing to share that much. He wasn't going to take his mask off, but I would hope that if I see him again, who knows, we might make some progress because hopefully he he's just a victim, or as I say, I have these uh, buttons that with an Uncle Sam that looks like a zombie holding out a brain, and I have it saying uh, something about the zombie contribute your brain to the zombie apocalypse. Help MAGA.
So a lot of stuff was brought up here, and I'm going to try and touch on a lot of it here, and try not to gish gallop too much. But what Molly was talking about is actually called the backfire effect, and that's when people, put up defenses when you challenge their deeply held beliefs, because it's almost like being attacked yourself. If you were to say something along the lines of like, "I don't think Jesus is real," and it's real to somebody, it's gonna be like saying, "I don't think your mom is real." Right. So someone is going to take offense to that, and they're going to put up their defenses, or they're going to fight back. Now, to Zach's point, we don't have to engage with people if we feel threatened, if we feel like we're in a negative situation. We are the power of our own bodies, right? We don't need to be in harm's way of anything. We don't owe it to anybody to have a conversation with somebody. It's just whether or not we feel like we can make a connection with somebody. That would be the important thing. If we feel like for whatever reason it's not important, or it doesn't seem to be working, then you just remove yourself from the situation in the kindest way possible. Now, one thing that I always try to say is kill them with kindness. Because if you treat people with kindness, there's nothing they can say to you, one, that's going to get your back up, because you're just going to say, I'm going to be kind here, and I'm going to be the bigger person. So there's nothing that anyone can say that could ever make you feel like, you have power over yourself at that point. The other thing that's going to do too is that people who may see you in a negative light are going to say, well, he was actually a nice guy or a nice girl, or, whatever. They can't say anything negative about you. I mean, they can, but then that's their problem and not yours. at that point. I can't remember what else was mentioned towards the end there, but when you're approaching people, um, yeah, I do the same thing where like I will kind of put myself, I don't know if it's in harm's way or just like with an unknown situation, like, is this person going to attack me or not? But, I would probably be the one to go forward and just say like, hey, how's it going? And if you sense any type of like hostility or anything like that, that's when I'm like, okay, you know what? Thank you so much for, entertaining my questions. And that's the thing I always do too is thank people for the conversation. Even if it's a negative conversation, I'll just say, thank you so much for having a conversation with me today. I've learned so much from that. I really hope you have as well. I'm going to go home and think about some things, and maybe when I see you in the future, maybe we can start up this conversation again. And that seems to like floor people sometimes because they're like, whoa, I thought this was like a hostile conversation. And it's like, people get heated when they are passionate or, they feel passionate about a certain subject or topic. And you can match people's energy. What I like to do is I try to remain calm because you kind of want to demonstrate the body language and like the temperature of the conversation that you want to have. So I kind of try and remain calm so that they reflect that when I'm having these conversations.
Yeah. So what I would encourage everyone to do is to be willing to approach these other people. Chances are, hey, nothing terrible's going to happen. And but I keep meeting people more in my line of thinking who are afraid to do so. And when you meet other people who had strange ideas, strange beliefs, you might not know exactly what to say. But it's only by practice that you are going to figure out what works, what doesn't work. How can you relate to these people?
Yeah. And you can weigh different things too. You can say, what if anything can I learn from this situation? If it feels like it's not even a learning situation, if you feel like it's going to be like fruitless, you don't have to approach it. Or you can say, what do I like? What would be my purpose for doing this? And if you can't come up with a good reason for the purpose of attempting a conversation, then it may also not be a good way to do that.
Right. Right.
Wouldn't you agree? Speaking of, like, I was talking about people that have, some really devastating and impactful religious trauma. You're a part of recovering from religion, Steve, so you understand that more than most. Um, there's something to be said for knowing if you are in a place to do this or not, right? And
Right.
then it's okay if you aren't. There are people that can, and I think being self-aware in that way, there's something to be said about that, because you will be doing more harm
Yeah.
overall than helping, right?
And that's the thing too. Like it's funny because we do have a lot of conversations with people who are recovering from religion if they're, whatever part of their journey they're at. But the funny thing is that you can experience burnout from hearing other people's trauma and conversations as well too. So, you got to make sure that you're in a good space to be able to have these conversations, like you're saying, Molly. Because if you're in a low spot or you're not feeling confident in yourself, I always say in my presentations that like if you're going to go into a conversation, go into it with confidence whether or not you're going to be trying to influence somebody or not, but just having confidence to have a conversation. Because if you're not feeling well, you're not feeling like it's yourself, and you feel like you might be irritated or something that somebody says might set you off, it's probably not the best time to have a conversation either. So we actually regularly have meetings with Recovering from Religion where all the volunteers come and we vent about our frustrations because
Mhm.
it allows you to refresh and restart and basically start from scratch when you go to have conversations with people who are calling in. The very first call that I ever took was somebody who was experiencing religious trauma and they were in a wheelchair, so they couldn't escape their religious parents. And they were just constantly getting bombarded with religious messaging all day long. They couldn't even escape. And I started asking questions in a Socratic way that's like, are you in a safe space? Is there a way that you can have a conversation or have community with people outside of your house, even though you can't get out of the house, And like, we're never there to like deconvert anyone or pressure them into doing things, but if we can kind of give them the tools to kind of come up with their own solution. So her solution was to go online and find a community. So she was able to find a community online, and she got to the point because we've stayed in contact because we have an internal they call it the online community. It's like a community where they can continue to go through their journey. But so she's been in there and she has her own YouTube page now and vouches for people that are in similar situations with disabilities and stuff like that. So it was just really cool to see her growth through all of that. And, for that to be my very first call that I took and then to have that type of impact on somebody and then for them to now be able to go and help people, like that's kind of what we're aiming for, the goals that we have. Provide people with the tools so that they can provide those tools for people in the future. And it's kind of like, it's like the set the ball rolling and then, you know, over time you're going to have a massive impact in the world.
Yeah. Each of us needs a safe space
Hmm.
we can retreat to, and each of us needs to be ready to provide a safe space for others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question for either one of you. So, what's one way that you have found that's effective to move a conversation that has maybe turned a little confrontational back to collaboration? Like, how do what is something that you've used successfully to diffuse a situation that could have gone either way?
Personal experiences is a good way. So if somebody is, if you're having a heated conversation and then they say something along the lines of like, well, I was told that I was, inhuman because I said this, whatever. And I'll say, oh, I've had the same experience before too. I've had people come up to me and tell me that they don't think that I'm a human or they treat me like I'm not a human. And then I find that way to have that commonality with the person. It's like you show them that you're human just like them. You show them that you get treated the same way they do, and then it's almost like it brings the conversation back to zero.
Yeah. Personal stories. Go back to your past, go back to experiences that you've had, and use that to try to restore some kind of connection that you are as human as anybody else.
Mhm.
Yeah, you basically provide a mirror. You hold up a mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
And each of us has our own stories.
Mhm.
So think about your stories. Think about what you have that might be able to relate to other people.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that my book is doing right now because my book is a collection of stories from my entire life. It's a memoir with a twist, I call it. And it's just incredible the amount of people that have reached out to me and said, like, this specific chapter means so much to me because of this. And I've had that happen numerous times because people see something different in each of the chapters that, speaks to them on like a personal level because they've been in the exact same situation or similar situation or didn't even know that that situation was possible. And those are the type of things that I hear all the time.
So we've talked about meeting people where they are. We've talked about leading with kindness and having respect and holding up mirrors. I'm going to use that. I think that's fantastic. Um, so there's got to be also something for getting creative in your way of connecting with them, right? So let's say, for example, they are someone who is very concerned with, the rhetoric that public schools are full of or already indoctrination camps, right? Um,
Mm.
you know, so there's got to be something to be said or an effective way to say, hey, I'm concerned about that too. This is indoctrination in a different way. You know what I mean? Like, so it's
Yeah.
almost it, like, how do you educate with while being respectful, while trying to find that commonality, I
I
guess.
think that's going to be like a death by a thousand cuts type of thing, where it's not going to be the first conversation you have with somebody.
No, no,
It's
no.
going to be, like, oh, I share your concerns on this too, in different ways. Like my community back home, what I do is, we'll go out and we'll feed the homeless and everything like that. But we don't really go to church or anything like that. We just kind of, have this community, and we do a lot of good for the society or whatever. And it's like, it drives up interest. You can say things like that, or you can just the smallest things ever, just say like, yeah, I have some concerns as well. Maybe we can chat about this over coffee sometime, and even just bring it to a different location. um, talk about something different. But like you never have to address it all at once. It can just be small conversations over time. And I don't know if anyone's ever had an experience where you have a family member where you slowly over time reveal who you are. It's the same type of conversation where like you just provide a little bit of like plant a seed, and then just every time you have a conversation, you water it a little bit more and a little bit more. And there's creative ways to do that where you can. There's actually some books on that as well. Greta Christina wrote a really good book, and I can't remember the name of it. It's something like Mom and Dad, I'm an Atheist or something like that. And it's like just small snippets of like how you can have conversations to build and build and build over time and not have the whole, all right, sit down. I'm going to tell you that I don't like the way this is run. That's kind of like the bad way to do it, and there's ways that you can do it just step by step.
Yeah, like Dr. Riedesel said, like it may take time, right? It
Yeah.
may take patience. So when
Mhm.
we're talking about all of this in terms of LifeWise, going and talking to your school board, talking to people who, in theory, care about kids as well. And once you explain to them your concerns with LifeWise, a lot of times we find that they agree with some of those concerns, right? Especially if it's anything other than the doctrine part of this. Dr. Riedesel, Steve, whoever wants to chime in, but what have you seen as far as school boards, what works? Like what strategies are better than others? And like how do we take these things and apply it to what we're dealing with specifically when it comes to like the encroachment of, one religion on the public school day?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I have not dealt very much with those kinds of questions. I'm finishing my first term on the board, 4-year terms. I have another year to go.
Okay.
But I I would approach this as, what do people expect from education? What is the purpose? What do you want your children to learn, to know? To many of us, we want them to learn how to be good citizens and to get along with each other, to be tolerant. But so how would you respond if you had a kid come home, had a LifeWise experience, or had some buddies in LifeWise experience who then claimed that, oh, your parents are divorced, they're going to hell, or you don't believe, or you're gay, or you're whatever it is, and if you don't change, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
Is that what you want? And for some people, they think that that is the purpose of education, is to try to divide, to try to say, here are the winners, here are the losers. But try to get beyond that to say, shouldn't every child have something? What kind of a country do we live in? What is a democracy? What do we want from a democracy? We want productive citizens. How can you be productive? It's by engaging with others, working with others. You don't have to believe what they believe,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd push
but
back on that when we're talking about some of the people that we are talking about, though, because, there is this belief that we should be a Christian nation and that they do have a
yes,
right to rule these things. So I'm
Hmm.
not trying to come to a middle ground with people who believe that, if I'm
yeah,
being honest with you, right?
that's
Yep.
right. That's right.
So
I've
there's
met
a
a couple people like that. Think that, hey, yeah, it's our Christian duty to, hey, we are a Christian nation.
yeah.
They're not up to,
There's another good book. It's called Relax, It's Just God, by Wendy Russell Thomas, I think her name is, which is kind of the same similar situation to what Molly was saying, where someone comes home, or actually I think Charles was saying this, where someone comes home and says, Mom, Dad, you're going to hell. So this was what this Wendy experienced because it was a non-religious household. And then her daughter started coming home and telling her all these things because she was learning it from other kids in school. So it's a really good strategies in that book if you are experiencing that, or if you wanted to look into that preemptively before that starts happening, or if it does start happening.
Yeah, that's
Another
something we see
thing,
a lot of. So, and that
yeah,
would be really good for people to look up. What was it called again?
I
it's
got
called
it.
Relax. Relax is just God.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing that I was going to say, and this is what I've had conversations with people about in the past, because there was a Bible program that was provided for the school, but it was an after school program, and it was like people could join it if they wanted to. And I started having friends that were like, well, maybe I'll put my kids in the Bible school because I feel like they're going to learn some really good, life skills and things like that. And I again use the street epistemology, but I said, like, are you sure it's the right denomination that you'd want your kids to learn? Because, religious education should be provided by the household, your household, if that's something that you want to do. Are you sure that they're going to be learning the right things? Like even my son, he wanted to do this coding program, but it was run by the Mennonite church. And I said to my wife, who is Christian, I'm like, do you realize what type of church this is? Do you realize that the Mennonite people like to segregate your children from you because that's how they get people, right? Like they will say, well, mom and dad don't actually believe the right thing, right? And they start getting your children that way. So it's like, are you sure that you want your kids to be into this in this program? Because it might not be the right denomination that you're looking for. So you just let them know, like, make sure you look into, what their practices are, what their about me page is, and things like that, just to kind of get them thinking, maybe this isn't the right program for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Because you can't really make the decision for them, but you can also influence their decision into looking into it to see if this is actually something they want to be a part of.
And
I
when we
think,
talk about denominations, be sure to recognize that there are many branches of almost any
Hmm.
denomination. And individual churches can be very independent or
Yeah.
interdependent. It's all different. So just because you hear Mennonite, which I know Mennonites, uh,
Hmm.
yeah, we know liberal Mennonites.
Yeah.
So to distinguish, just to be aware, we're not all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you look into the program, and it says
Oh yeah.
that
Yep.
this denomination
Check it
believes
out.
that, God is the only, or, Yahweh is the only true God, and
Yep.
that type of thing, right? Like maybe that's not the right thing that you want them
If they
to do.
adhere to if they adhere to the Danvers statement, look out
Mm-hmm.
as an
I think
example.
I think that goes back to knowing your audience, right? So some of the issues that we see with LifeWise specifically are safety concerns. That's bipartisan almost across the board, is people understand now more than ever that um, you know, those that want to offend will do anything that they can to get close to children in order to offend. And that is something that is really effective. So when we're talking about them taking these kids off campus to a second location that's not a secured location, that's not a secured campus, that is a really big, effective argument. So
Yeah.
you can do the safety, you can do the grift of it all, right? We talk about the money. Dr. Riedesel, very early on in the conversation, was talking about how these local communities, it's served to them as though it's free and it's helpful and it's not going to cost the school or the kids any money. But the reality is that all of the money is coming from those communities locally, whether it's the churches or the old women that mean well, or whoever it is, and then it all gets funneled up to corporate. And what we
Right.
don't see is any kind of giving back. So they're not doing clothing drives, they're not doing anything
Yeah.
for the community. Every single fundraiser they have is for LifeWise corporate, like to give money to LifeWise corporate. And so again, that's another whole angle to take, right? And I think,
Right.
again,
Right.
if you know what you're talking about, if you know someone is very faithful, ask them about the denomination. Tell
Yeah.
them it's Southern Baptist. If you know someone's concerned about whatever it is, the safety, perverts, things like that,
Hmm.
into that. And so, I think that can be really effective. And we do that as an organization regularly, right?
Yeah. And that's part of the one of the main reasons that you bring confidence to a conversation too, right? If you know what you're talking about coming into a conversation, the con in con man is for confidence, right? If you say something with confidence, which, certain people in leadership are very good at doing, you can influence people to do kind of what you think is the right thing to do. And you can also approach it in like a facetious way, and you can just say, well, if we're going to allow this type of thing, then the Satanists might be able to do the same type of thing, right? And just like we know what the after school Satan program is, it's fun and games, and they actually just paint pictures and things like that and whatever. It's nothing to do with Satan. It's not, the Satanists don't even worship Satan. It's just um, it's a satire. But the thing is that you can use absurdism to say to them, if we're going to allow LifeWise in the school, that means that the Satanist programs can also take place,
which
and
we've
just
seen.
which
We've
yeah,
seen that. So
yeah.
there's a question in the chat here. I'm running into an issue where people are arguing that it's optional. So if I don't agree, just don't sign my kid up. I'm having trouble getting the larger impact across. Any advice?
Mm,
Okay.
that's a good question.
Well, I would say that one of the biggest things by saying it's optional is the disruption of the school of the school day. Because what supposedly they leave during a time in which nothing important is happening in the classroom. But the time is how would a school figure that out with all these different class levels and all the situations and take the time that they leave, the time that they can settle down when they come back? Uh, it is disruption,
Yeah.
pure and simple.
I would
Teach.
also ask the school board to provide a take-home letter that says that this is an optional program. And please, if you're going to partake in this, ensure that your children are under the understanding that other children in the classroom may not believe the same thing as them, and not to push their beliefs on other kids.
That'd be
That,
great.
yeah,
Because
because the
that's what we
school board
see.
should be able to provide that if it is an optional thing. I would say the school board should be able to provide something that says that, because there are going to be people from different backgrounds and beliefs in the schools.
Well, what they usually do is just say this isn't affiliated with the school, but that next step of what you said, please make sure your children aren't pushing their beliefs on
Right.
others who don't hold the beliefs. I think that would be great to see,
Yeah.
because that is what happens. We all know the stories here in the group, in the chat. I think I mean, this is what happens, right? These other kids who aren't going are being faced with this pressure. They are being affected. No matter how many times they spew that argument, just don't sign your kids up. It doesn't affect them. That's
Right.
not factual. We have so many reports of kids being affected, whether it is their education or they're being bullied or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
show that evidence. That's really all you can do.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think it's going to be brushed off a lot of the times. It's going to be
Yeah.
brushed off as a one-off, and it's hard to
I
And
think
reach it.
having a whole bunch of parents that are concerned also just requesting that same letter to be sent home. And then in the letter, it can also include, like if there is breach of this, there will be consequences, or there may be consequences, stuff like that, right? It's like, if there's kids that are going to be saying this type of stuff to other kids that are not necessarily believing the same thing as them, I wouldn't say detention, but maybe there's going to be some type of consequences where they have to, be in a different room or something for a different period of time, or who knows, right?
and
But the school can figure that out.
yeah, and how do you get these kids to stop from one of the primary reasons that LifeWise is doing all this is so that they can come back during the school day and then
Hmm.
share, hey, here's what a good time I had. I'm going to get some prizes if I can get you to come too. And
Right.
Yeah, so
So
what this comes down
yeah.
to is it's a recruitment pipeline, right? That they
Hmm.
have shoved into our public school day. And they're shouldering that on religious freedom, when really it's impeding on everyone else's. That's the reality of it. So Zach and I have been hearing, don't sign your kid up for 3 years. And what I would say back to that, my advice would be, um, okay, I'm not going to. But when your kid being signed up starts to affect my kid who's not signed up, then we have a problem, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
Because
that's how this started. I mean, how I got
That's
here.
exactly how it started. And I think we really need to talk about and really face facts about how this whole narrative of parental rights is being used and being bastardized and being spun in a way that is hurting our teachers and our kids in our public schools. And we really need to take that back and say, no, it's not about parental rights, right? Because not every parent can be trusted to take care of their children in a responsible way. That's why we have public school. Like, that's one of the uses of it, right? Is so that there's
Yep.
public eyes on kids who are being abused, who are being left behind, who are being neglected. And so, the whole parental rights thing, I always say, like, absolutely, absolutely, I respect your parental rights. When they start to trample on mine is when we have a problem. And that's exactly
Yeah.
what happened to Zach. That's what we're seeing. And I think that if you can say that in a kinder way than I just did, then that's just another tool to show them, like, I understand. And that's what's happening to my family. Right. And so,
I think it's on the school board, and I think that maybe if there was a petition to get the school board to actually put out a statement towards LifeWise to say these are the conditions that you have to abide by, or you're not allowed to run this program. So if they were to say something along the lines of, like this, the participants are not allowed to, recruit others, whatever, because that's against the school policy and that type of thing, then that would probably be a good way to do it.
Yeah. You'll start getting into a bunch of legal issues and nuances there when you go down that route. There is a way to do it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
The key with saying something like that is the schools do have the right to limit it to non-instructive time,
Right.
non-instruction time, right? Like, the schools can't just blatantly say your kids can't come back and talk about this, but they can limit it to talking about it during lunch and recess, that type of thing. So,
Right. Right.
because otherwise they'll just get sued by First Liberty. First Liberty has been very open about saying they're going to sue people. So we're a little over an hour here. I want to make sure we let anybody who's in the call here ask any questions if they want to jump in or join the discussion. I want to give them time to do that. If anybody has any thoughts or comments or questions.
feel free to chime in. Know that you are being recorded. So if you don't want to be seen, you don't want your voice to be recorded, don't do that. Ask it in chat. We're more than happy to take the time to answer. While you're thinking or while you're typing, real quickly, I did want to propose this idea that I just had while we were having this great, honest discussion. What do you guys think about like a one pager, just sort of with some of the things that we've talked about and some resources and some books that you've gone over, and Dr. Riedesel, some other things maybe that we can come up with? We'll run it by you too and sort of just put it out as something that can be another tool.
Yeah, I've got several books. I have not mentioned authors and
Sure.
titles.
Steve, would you be willing to look over something like that
Yeah,
and
Absolutely.
absolutely.
sort of
Yeah.
give us so we can put it out there for people?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. That'd be awesome. So if no one has any questions
Molly,
or
I do.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And I apologize. I joined late. I was actually at a Meet the Candidate night. One of the things I didn't know if you guys talked about was steel manning. And I just heard about it probably on your site. But can you guys touch a little bit about that if you're familiar with it?
Sure. Sure, yeah. So the opposite of steel manning would be straw manning. So that's like creating like a fake version of someone's argument so you can knock it down really easily. So that's basically like saying, well, you just think that there's some magic man in the sky that does everything that's gonna, snap his fingers and everything's gonna be okay. Well, that's not what people are arguing. So when you're saying that, yeah, you can poo-poo it off as, something ridiculous, but that's not necessarily what religious people are claiming. Whereas steel manning is actually getting the points of someone's argument and repeating it back to them. There's something called Rappaport's rules, which is if you can repeat back to somebody their statement in a way that it would make them say, I wish I thought of it that way, then that's the ultimate steel man. So if you can steel man someone's argument to the point where they're like, oh, wow, that's, I wish I had said it that way. That's called Rappaport's rules. But it's basically steel manning is telling someone back, this is exactly what it is that you're trying to say here, and them saying yes,
Sounds
if
like
that
it
makes
takes
sense.
practice.
Definitely takes practice for sure. It means like, the ultimate active listening, right? And being able to, say back what they are saying to you in a way that they would agree with.
There's an interesting comment in the chat here. There's a LifeWise director who said they won't teach that others go to hell. How can I question her gospel? I think my counter to that would be like how, I guess my question is, how are you going to divert from what you are told to teach? Because LifeWise puts their curriculum out, and that is what you, as a director and a teacher, are supposed to teach. So if
Mm,
we're diverting from that, that's just a whole other array of problems, right?
yeah.
Well,
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, because then there's no oversight to what these people are teaching. And as we all know, that anytime you're taking something on yourself and you're regurgitating that information, you're giving a part of yourself away with it, right? You're tinging it with your own ideals and your own values and your own things, your own biases. And that's something that is obviously happening and can happen. And that goes just to illustrate, like, who knows? Like, even if LifeWise is telling them to teach this denomination, what is this teacher teaching? We don't, there is no oversight. So that is also
Right.
another thing to keep in mind, I think, as well.
And the other thing too is that children don't really have the capacity for critical thinking. They also
Mhm.
don't have the capacity for understanding their own worldview yet. So the problem is that they can say that, that they're not going to teach others that others go to hell, whatever, which is it's fine for an adult to say, oh, okay, no problem. But for a kid, they're not going to understand the difference.
It's
And they're
No.
only
impossible.
going to they're going to be scared when they hear that people are going to hell, and they're going to ask their parents, am I going to go to hell, and that type of thing, right? So
And we find too, like, kids are inherently kind and love each
yeah,
other, right? Like, so when you are told, oh, your friends are going to hell because A, B, C, and D, you're concerned and you want to help them, and you're being told
right.
you can save them by delivering them the gospel. And so there is this whole other level of manipulation that goes on in that way as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's 9 best practices for raising free thinking children, and that comes from Dale McGowan's book, Parenting Beyond Belief. That's probably, and also he has another book called Raising Free Thinkers. And if anyone wants to listen to an amazing podcast with an amazing voice and amazing insights, the podcast version of Raising Free Thinkers by Dale McGowan, he goes into the 9 best practices, which I don't know if I can name them all off the top of my head, but basically curiosity being the number one thing because that leads to critical thinking. And one of them is religious literacy. So learning about different religions. So if you learn about different religions, it's more of like an inoculation because you're like, okay, these are all really similar stories. And it's not necessarily saying that they're all wrong. It's just that the kids are going to say, you know what, these are all like very similar. I'm going to pick and choose what I like from each, or nothing at all, right? But it just gives them the option. Another really good one is active moral development. So saying like, look at that girl's face over there. What do you think she is feeling right now? How do you think we can make her turn that frown upside down and make it into a smile? um, Encouraging empathy is kind of along the same lines, but basically like saying, I'm going to take you to a soup kitchen and I'm going to show you what it's like to see the homeless population and how they have to deal with their everyday life, right? If you can encourage the kids to get out there and see that firsthand, you can tell them all day that there's people out there that don't have food. But when you show them, that's
Yeah.
really when they really get it, right?
part of the
Um,
yeah,
Sorry,
part
go
of
ahead.
the yeah, part of the problem here is what do we want our students to be learning? What happens if a school has strategic plans and ideas and concepts, what they want the kids to learn? They go to a LifeWise Academy and they're being taught the opposite.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah,
you're getting them with conflicting messages coming
right.
back. Also consider generally public schools have teachers that are pretty well vetted, accountable.
Mhm.
And there's a shortage of teachers across most of the country.
Yeah.
So where is LifeWise getting all their teachers?
Hmm.
I can answer that. They're
Well,
either retired teachers. We do see that a lot, which, okay, I can understand where they're going with that, but a retired teacher doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good person or that you're a capable educator.
Yeah,
Or they're getting them from, Sunday school teachers and volunteers and like well-meaning old women who are very faithful. I mean, that is like
right.
that's the core of who we're seeing.
Right.
Yeah, and
Oh,
and
I'm sorry,
and the
and
nine.
moms.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah.
the
And the 9
best
best
example of,
practices are, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the best example of what he just said, teaching the conflicting things. There was an article that just came out today about LifeWise taking these kids to the Ark Museum, where they're learning creationism as science, right? And then they're coming back to school and learning about evolution and biology. That article
Right.
just came out today in the paper. So it's a prime example of what we're talking about, teaching them conflicting things.
Yeah. Foundations are also built at home though. So the 9 best practices kind of work best at home, right? Because and the thing is that you're not telling the kids, okay, you have to learn about curiosity. You're not actually saying the word curiosity. You're just putting them in situations where they're going to use their curiosity, or they're going to, take them out into the woods, and then you can say like, oh, there's a deer over there. Look at how they blend in with the woods. Do you think that that deer would be able to survive really well if it was pink? Right? Just things like that to like encourage them to think, curiously. But like those best practices, it's more like for just so that it has a name, but it's basically like these little concepts you're going to be teaching them at home. So you can teach them critical thinking because you can teach them how to think, not what to think. So that when they get to a situation at the school, another one is actual gentle questioning of authority. So allowing your kids to question your authority. So saying like, it's bedtime. And then they say, well, why is it bedtime? It's like, well, because if you don't get enough sleep, then you're going to be grumpy and you're going to make me grumpy. Do you really want me to be grumpy? Right? It's like teaching them little lessons. So like when they have someone at school tell them, or in church tell them, let's go in the back room here without your parents, they're going to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to go with you until I ask my parents, or something like that, right? Like you're just going to encourage these types of things. So if you look up the 9 best practices through Dale McGowan, like they're really helpful tips.
Yeah,
And like I said, we'll go back through the recording and we'll include all of these recommendations just so that you can have them, when you want to reference them.
For sure.
yeah, I really like those 9 best practices, and I certainly want to get a review and be able to get a collection of them. Thank you.
Yeah, for
And,
sure.
and I feel
Great.
I've contributed to interrupting sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay.
No, thank you both so much for being here. If you guys, anyone in the audience, if you end up having a question that you think of later, you can always reach out to Zach and I. You can always reach out to the organization, overarching contact at seculareducationassociation.org. Will get directly to us and we can find you an answer or find you some sort of advice or try to help in some way with your question that you come up with. So thanks so much for being here with us. We appreciate it. Zach, is there anything else you wanted to share?
No, I don't think so. I think it was great.
Thanks so much for being with us, Dr. Riedesel. Steve, we appreciate you so much. The next big panel we're going to do is going to be really cool. I hope to see everyone there. It is going to be our deep dive into the LifeWise documentary. So we're going to have some people watch it and then come back and report on it. And we're
Cool.
going to really look at the propaganda that they're spewing. So that should be good. We appreciate everyone. You guys have a
Take
good
care.
night. Take care. Have constructive conversations, you guys.
Be willing to talk.
Yes. Build bridges, right? And
Yeah.
if you can't,
Absolutely.
if you're not in a place to and you're burning stuff, then just stay out of it for now. It's fine.
Yep.
We all need to play our part. Have a good night.
All right.